All right, ready to dive into something pretty important.
Always.
We're talking about platelets.
The tiny powerhouses.
Yeah, those little guys in our blood. You showed some interesting articles and research, so let's really break it down for our listeners.
That's good.
What they do, why we should even care about their levels, and what happens when things go wrong.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Oh, really?
Because, most people only think about platelets when they cut themselves.
You're right. Exactly.
But their role in our health, it goes way beyond patching us up.
Okay, so before we even get to the details, like the platelet counts and disorders, can we just start with a crash course on what platelets actually are?
For sure, yeah. So they're not even actually full cells. They are just fragments
Interesting.
that break off from larger cells called megakaryocytes
Megakaryo.
in the bone marrow.
Yeah.
Just like one factory producing thousands of these tiny first responders ready to spring into action at a moment's notice.
So, if I'm getting this right, they're kind of like the 911 operators of our blood,
Exactly.
constantly on alert
Always looking for trouble.
for any sign of trouble. Yeah. Okay, so their main job then is hemostasis,
Right.
which, just to remind everyone, that's the process of stopping bleeding.
That's it.
So, picture, I don't know, like a tiny construction crew that just like rushes to patch up any damage to our blood vessels.
Yeah, like a tiny little construction crew.
Okay, that analogy works for me.
Good.
But what is a normal platelet count? How many of these tiny responders are we talking about?
So the normal range is typically it's between 150,000 and 450,000 platelets
Wow,
per microliter of blood,
that's a lot.
which sounds like a lot.
Right.
But, a microliter is just a tiny little drop.
So millions of these things are just circulating in our blood at all times.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow, okay. But what happens when this whole system goes haywire? Like, what happens when the count is too low?
Well, that's when we start talking about thrombocytopenia, which is where you just have fewer platelets than normal.
Okay.
So your blood might not clot as efficiently.
Right.
And that puts you at risk for excessive bleeding and bruising.
Oh, wow.
And, even a small bump
Right.
could become a concern.
Okay, so what causes this dip in platelet count then?
Well, a lot of things.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're surprisingly diverse.
Okay.
Sometimes the bone marrow itself, right, where the platelets are made, it just isn't functioning properly.
Oh, so it's like the factory's broken.
Yeah, like a broken factory. That can happen in conditions like leukemia,
Yeah, okay.
where the production of normal blood cells is disrupted,
Right.
or aplastic anemia, where the bone marrow isn't producing enough cells at all.
So the platelet factory is malfunctioning in a way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
But there are other things, too.
Oh, okay.
Autoimmune diseases like lupus or ITP, immune thrombocytopenia.
Okay.
Those can also lead to thrombocytopenia.
Yeah.
And that's when your body mistakenly identifies platelets as, like, foreign invaders and attacks them.
So your own body turns against you. That's a bit scary.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? I mean,
Well,
what other kinds of things can affect that?
some medications.
Yeah.
Like some heparin or chemotherapy drugs that can interfere with platelet production. And then even some viral infections,
Like what?
like hepatitis C or HIV. Even those can impact your platelet levels.
So it's really not just one single cause.
No, not at all.
It's a bunch of different things that could be happening.
Right. It could be a really complex interplay of factors.
That makes sense. Okay, but let's say someone has thrombocytopenia. What kind of symptoms would they be experiencing? What are the red flags?
Well, one of the most common signs is easy bruising.
Easy bruising.
Yeah. I mean, we're not just talking about, a little bump.
Right.
This is where even slight pressure can cause a bruise.
So if someone's suddenly looking like they walked into a door frame
Right.
a lot, then that's a cause for concern.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, it's not just bruising though, right?
No.
What else?
Yeah. You might notice that cuts bleed longer,
Oh, okay.
even small ones.
So even a paper cut could be a big deal.
Yeah, potentially.
What else?
Keep an eye out for petechiae.
Petechiae?
Yeah, they're tiny red or purple spots on the skin.
Okay.
They look like mini bruises,
Okay.
and that's bleeding under the skin.
Gotcha. Okay, so that nosebleeds, bleeding gums, those are all kind of warning signs, right?
Right.
But what about the opposite scenario? What if your platelet count is too high?
Oh, yeah, that's
Is that a problem too?
yeah, that's called thrombocytosis.
Thrombocytosis.
And it could be just as serious as thrombocytopenia. Because, when you have too many platelets,
Right.
they can clump together more easily,
Okay.
which increases the risk of blood clots.
And that's bad.
Yes, that's bad.
Yeah.
Because a blood clot in the wrong place,
Right.
that can block blood flow
Okay.
and lead to things like strokes or heart attacks
Oh, wow.
or even a pulmonary embolism.
So we need platelets to stop bleeding. But having too many can also be a big problem.
Exactly. It's all about balance.
So what causes this excess of platelets in the first place?
Well, just like with thrombocytopenia,
Yeah.
there are a lot of potential culprits.
Really?
Yeah. One group of conditions is called myeloproliferative disorders.
Myeloproliferative.
Yeah, those are diseases of the bone marrow where certain blood cells are overproduced, and that includes platelets.
Oh, so the factory's working overtime.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but it's not always a bone marrow issue, right?
No.
So what else could it be?
Well, sometimes it's just a reaction to something else,
Okay.
like an infection
Makes sense.
or inflammation. Even some anemia can lead to an increase in platelet count.
So it's like the body is trying to compensate.
Yeah, it's like sending in the troops,
Right.
like a defense mechanism.
Gotcha. Okay, so again, a whole spectrum of causes.
Yes.
Some temporary, some long-term. If someone suspects they have a platelet imbalance, how is that even diagnosed? What's the first step?
Usually it starts with a simple blood test, a CBC.
CBC.
Yeah, a complete blood count, a routine test.
Right, I've had those done before.
And it just gives you a snapshot of your major blood cell types,
Okay.
including your platelets.
What happens if the CBC shows that the count is way off, though?
Well, that's when the real detective work starts.
Oh.
Yeah, the doctor's going to want to figure out why the count is off.
Right.
They'll look at your medical history,
Okay.
your symptoms,
Right.
and other factors.
Okay, so it's kind of like putting together a puzzle, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It's not just about the numbers.
Gotcha.
It's about getting the full picture.
Makes sense. So we talked a bit about treatment earlier,
Right.
but I'm really curious to get into the specifics.
Yeah.
What are some of the options for managing these platelet imbalances, like both low and high counts?
That's a great question. And it really highlights why it's so important to understand the underlying cause.
Right. Makes sense.
Treatment is not one size fits all.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like trying to put a Band-Aid on a broken bone.
Exactly.
If you're not treating the root of the problem, it's not going to help.
Right. So let's break down the different approaches.
Okay, so that sounds like a perfect place to pick up in our next segment.
Sounds good.
We'll come back and we'll explore those treatment options and then maybe even get into some of the really fascinating research.
Yeah, cutting edge stuff.
The cutting edge research that's happening in the world of platelets. So stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. Remember where we left off? We were talking about all the ways to manage platelet imbalances.
Yes, those treatment options.
And you mentioned it all comes down to understanding what's causing the problem in the first place.
Absolutely. So for thrombocytopenia, right?
Yeah, when the count is too low.
The severity really matters.
Okay.
If it's mild and not causing any symptoms,
Yeah.
doctors might just recommend watchful waiting.
So they just kind of keep an eye on it.
Yeah, basically they monitor the platelet count over time, but they don't actually do anything yet.
So like a wait and see approach.
Exactly. But if the platelet count really drops, or you start having those symptoms we talked about,
Yeah, like the easy bruising and all that.
right, the bleeding, then treatment becomes pretty crucial.
So what are some of the treatments for thrombocytopenia then?
Well, it really depends on the cause.
Okay.
But one common approach is corticosteroids.
Corticosteroids.
Yeah, those medications can help suppress the immune system
But
if the thrombocytopenia is caused by an autoimmune disorder.
so it calms down the immune system if it's attacking those platelets.
Exactly. And in other cases, corticosteroids can actually stimulate the bone marrow.
Oh, so it can work both ways.
Yeah, it can help the bone marrow produce more platelets.
Interesting. But what if medications aren't enough to get that count up?
Well, in severe cases,
Yeah.
especially if there's a risk of, really serious bleeding,
Right.
they might need a platelet transfusion.
A platelet transfusion.
Yeah, it's basically like a direct infusion of those platelets.
Oh, so you're just giving the body what it needs.
Exactly. You're getting that clotting system back on track.
Wow. That's pretty intense. Are there, like, any surgical options for thrombocytopenia?
Well, most cases are managed with medication or transfusions, like we talked about.
Right.
But sometimes they might consider removing the spleen.
Oh, okay.
This is usually for certain types of immune thrombocytopenia,
Yeah.
where the spleen is actually destroying those platelets.
Right. The spleen is like a filter, getting rid of old platelets.
Exactly. So in some cases, removing it can help increase the lifespan of the platelets
Okay.
and bump up the count.
So that would be kind of a last resort.
Yeah, definitely not a first-line treatment, only in very specific situations.
Got it. Okay, so we've covered the basics of treating low platelet counts.
Right.
Let's talk about the opposite,
Thrombocytosis.
thrombocytosis. When the count is too high.
Yes. And just like with thrombocytopenia,
Mhm.
the approach depends on the cause and how severe it is. If the
Okay.
count is just a little bit high
Yeah.
and it's not causing any problems,
Right.
they might just monitor it.
So again, that wait and see approach.
Exactly. But if the count is very high, where
Okay.
there's a real risk of blood clots,
Yeah.
they might use medications
Medications to do what?
to lower platelet production or make them less sticky.
Less sticky.
Yeah, so they're less likely to clump together and form those clots.
Interesting. What kind of medications would they use for that?
Well, sometimes they use low-dose aspirin.
Aspirin. Really?
Yeah, because it can help prevent the platelets from sticking together.
Huh. Okay.
But it's important to remember.
Right. Always talk to your doctor first. Yeah.
Exactly. Never self-medicate, especially with something like this.
Good advice. Are there any other medications they might use besides aspirin?
Yeah, there are drugs that can actually target the bone marrow directly
Okay.
to reduce platelet production.
And that's for more serious cases.
Yeah, usually when the count is very high or aspirin isn't working.
Got it. So we've talked a lot about medications and even surgery, but are there any lifestyle changes that could help manage platelet imbalances?
Yeah, absolutely. For people with thrombocytopenia,
Okay.
it's really important to minimize the risk of bleeding.
Right. Makes sense.
So that might mean avoiding contact sports
No.
or anything that could cause an injury.
So no more roller derby.
Probably not a good idea.
Okay.
Even little things, like using a soft toothbrush, can make a difference.
Oh, wow. I never thought of that. And what about medications, like over-the-counter stuff?
Yeah, it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor
Okay.
because some medications can actually impair platelet function,
Like what?
like ibuprofen or aspirin.
Okay, yeah. So always check with your doctor first.
Exactly. What about diet? Does that play a role?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Well, there's no specific diet that's been proven to, directly affect platelet count.
Right.
But eating a healthy, balanced diet is always good for your overall health.
Right. Including the bone marrow.
Exactly. And staying hydrated is important too.
Okay, good to know. Anything else that people should watch out for in general?
Yeah, always pay attention to any unusual bleeding or bruising,
Okay.
especially if you have other symptoms too,
Like what?
like fatigue or fever or unexplained weight loss.
Right. Those could be signs of something more serious.
Exactly. Early detection and treatment are really key here.
Okay, so we've covered what causes platelet imbalances, the symptoms,
Right.
and even all the treatment options.
For both low and high counts.
Right. But you mentioned earlier that there's even more to these little cells
Oh, yeah.
than we realize. I'm really curious to hear about the latest research.
Yeah, that's where things get exciting
Okay.
because platelets are involved in way more than just hemostasis.
Really? Like what?
Researchers are finding out they play roles in inflammation, immune response, wound healing, even cancer.
Wow. Okay, I'm definitely ready to dive into that.
Let's do it.
Let's pick up this conversation in our next segment. We'll explore some of that cutting-edge research that's pushing the boundaries of what we know about these little powerhouses. We're back for our final deep dive into these platelets.
Rounding it out.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to hear more about all this research.
It is fascinating stuff.
You mentioned that they do so much more
Oh, yeah.
than just stopping bleeding.
It's amazing.
So much more than we thought.
It really is.
Let's start with their role in, inflammation
Okay.
and immune response. I know we talked about that a little before, but can you kind of elaborate on that? What makes platelets such important players in our immune system?
Well, think about it this way, right?
Okay.
When there's an injury or infection, platelets are some of the first ones there.
Right. First responders.
Yeah, and they don't just form a clot. They release all these signaling molecules
Okay.
that actually attract other immune cells to the area.
So they're like calling for backup.
Exactly. Like little dispatchers.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, they help orchestrate that whole immune response.
So they make sure the right cells and molecules get there to fight off the infection.
Right, or to repair whatever damage is there.
That makes sense. I guess they're already in the bloodstream, constantly patrolling.
Always on the lookout.
Always on the lookout. Okay, so what else? What other amazing roles are we learning about?
One area that's really interesting
Yeah.
and a little bit concerning is the role of platelets in cancer.
In cancer? Really?
Yeah, they can actually contribute to tumor growth.
Wait, how? I thought they were supposed to help with healing.
It's complicated, but it seems like tumor cells can kind of hijack platelets.
What?
Yeah, they exploit their natural abilities.
For their own purposes.
Exactly. So, for instance, tumor cells can coat themselves in platelets
Okay.
to hide from the immune system.
Oh, so they're using them as camouflage.
Exactly. It's like a shield.
That's pretty sneaky.
It is. But that's not all.
Oh, no. What else?
Platelets can also help those tumor cells invade tissues
Oh, wow.
and spread to other parts of the body.
So they're helping them spread.
Yeah, it's called metastasis.
Metastasis.
Right.
So not only are they hiding the cancer cells, they're
Yeah.
also helping them get around.
It's a complex process.
Yeah, that's a little unsettling.
It is. But the good news is,
Oh, good news.
by understanding how platelets contribute to this process,
Yeah.
we can try to develop new ways to fight it.
So this knowledge is actually helpful, even though it's kind of scary.
Right, because researchers are already developing drugs
Okay.
that specifically target those platelets.
Okay, so they stop them from shielding and transporting the tumor cells.
Exactly. And that makes those cancer cells more vulnerable.
To our own immune system.
Exactly. And to treatments like chemo.
Wow, that's amazing. That could really change things.
Yeah, the potential is huge.
It sounds like we've still got a lot to learn.
Oh, absolutely.
What are some of the big questions that scientists are still working on? With platelets, I mean.
Well, one of the main things is understanding how they're formed and regulated in the first place. We know they come from megakaryocytes.
Right, in the bone marrow.
Right. But the specifics, like the molecular mechanisms,
Yeah.
we're still figuring that out.
So like the detailed instruction manual, we don't have it yet.
Yeah, something like that.
But once we do, then what?
Well, if we could decipher that,
Yeah.
we might be able to find new ways to stimulate platelet production in people with thrombocytopenia.
Right, to get their counts up.
Exactly. Or to inhibit it in people with thrombocytosis.
So we could control it both ways.
Exactly.
That's incredible. What else? What other mysteries are they working on?
Another big one is how platelets actually communicate with other cells.
Okay.
We talked about them signaling immune cells,
Right.
but they probably interact with other cell types too.
Makes sense.
And they release a whole mix of molecules that can influence all kinds of things.
So it's like they're talking to everyone.
Yeah, it's like a big communication network.
A network. Wow.
So if we can understand that communication,
Yeah.
it could open up so many possibilities for new treatments.
Wow, this has been an incredible journey,
I agree.
learning about these little cells.
Tiny but mighty.
Yeah, tiny but mighty. It's amazing to think about all the things they do.
It really is.
And all the potential they hold.
It's really a testament to, the power of science.
Right.
And the amazing things we can discover when we really dig deep.
Well, I can't wait to see what the future holds for platelet research.
Me too.
It's clear that we're just getting started.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for taking us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll be back soon with another deep dive into a brand new topic.
Sounds great.
Until then, stay curious.
You've been listening to the Learning Podcast, a production of metaNESTA. Remember, learning is a journey. One step, one insight, one skill at a time. We'll see you next time. Keep learning, stay curious, and as always, be awesome.